This is the Unstarving Musician podcast. I'm your host, Robonzo. The podcast features conversations with me, indie music artists, and industry professionals, and it's all intended to help other indie music artists be better at marketing, business, the creative process, and all the other things that empower us to do more of what we love. Make music. Welcome to another episode. I think this is going to be 218. Let's check that. I might as well get it right. Yeah, 218. Amazing! My audio gear is all screwed up today. I am doing this for the second time this afternoon. I did it actually on an Instagram Live, which you can still see at Robonzo Drummer on Instagram. And I attempted to use Restream using their in-app studio to go on multiple other channels, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitch. I haven't checked Twitch, but Twitter was the only thing I saw that came out from the others, and the audio was terrible. Anyway, but I don't care about that. This right here, this is what matters. I just got back, as I alluded to, I think, from a big Mexican vacation. The wife and I went to the cities of Querétaro, Chapala, Ajijic, Mazatlan, Monterrey, and Mexico City. We just returned this past Saturday. It's great to be home, but what a fun time we had. We saw friends, reconnected with family, which was a profoundly joyous experience. The trip was not without drama, though, the tone of which was set by an evening arrival at the Mexico City airport to be told that our rental car was not available. In fact, no rental cars were available. In all honesty, I didn't want to drive in Mexico City at night anyway, so it kind of worked out in my favor. There was more drama, but I will spare you the rest. You can DM me or email me if you really want to know. Cool. In spite of it all, we had a wonderful trip. The food was amazing. We got to drink regional beer and wine, went to a couple of museums, did a sunset sail, dined with family, nothing better than that. So it was an experience of a lifetime, really. The Unstarving Musician is made possible through the generosity of its listeners. That's you. If you love what I do here on the podcast, please visit unstarvingmusician.com/crowd sponsor or the show notes for this episode to learn how you can offer your support. So my guest is Andrew Chris, multi-instrumentalist, songwriter. I hate multi-instrumentalists. I guess I'm one, but he's like really good at it. I barely play guitar. I'm a drummer. I barely play guitar. I get by on singing. I can play the cajones and percussion things, cowbell, you know, that kind of thing. Still working my way around the guitar, but Andrew's list of early musical influences read almost exactly like mine. Yet he's no less than 20 years younger than me. When I asked about it, he gave the expected answer. His dad turned him on to all these bands. He was literally shuffling on his MP3 player as a young boy the same artists that I was listening to when I was a kid. Only I didn't have an MP3 player. I was doing it old school, vinyl, 8-track, cassette, baby. Our musical influences have diverged, though, because of our age difference and general exposure to music. However, I found that his current endeavors in music are not too unlike my own. We had a great conversation about his latest releases, including a single called Floatin and his 2021 album, Studio Rat. We also talk about his studies in film and much more. Yes, there's always much more, isn't there, kids? He started creating music and art at a young age, so he has a decent body of unreleased work. I told him I was envious. I don't have a big body of unreleased work. I'm just trying to get to my third single. At the same time, our conversation gave me some inspiration and hope for making a lot more music. One thing we didn't talk about where creating a body of unreleased music is the cost of creating said music, which can be tied to the size of our audience and or tied to having a great source of side income or support. I guess I'll start asking about that more often, the cost of creating a body of work. However, maybe that's why it's unreleased, right? Because it costs a lot to release music when you're trying to do it right. All right, well, I'll ask next time. I'll dive into that. Maybe I'll even dive in a follow-up manner with Andrew. All right, here is me and Andrew Chris. So you have a new single out. Is it Floatin or Floating?
I however you want to say it.
It's floating, right? With an apostrophe.
Floatin', yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it doesn't matter. I kind of just put it as that because if you search for floating with a G, a
Uh-huh.
lot of other songs come up. So
Now, did you also just prior to that do the Studio Rat album, like all in the last year or several months here?
yeah, well, Studio Rat, it's an interesting one because that was kind of in the like there are some songs on there that are 2.5 years old. Some I made literally weeks before I released the album. The whole concept behind it was to get back to live instruments because for a while I was in bands and then I started to produce. I would record some live guitar and some bass and stuff, but mostly like drums were programmed drums. But then I got my drum set in my own house that I could record myself. And I was like, let's just make a whole album where there's just live drums on the entire thing. And you know what? Let's
Yes.
just do live instruments for the whole thing. So yeah, that came out January, and then now I have this whole catalog of other singles, and Floatin' was the first one. So there will be quite a lot coming in the next few months.
Oh, that's cool. Like, what
Yeah.
is the time span of your having written all the stuff that we're talking about right now?
Floatin' actually started maybe 2 months ago. It was a blank
Okay.
project, and then by the end of the night, it was pretty much how you hear it now. Besides, the verse wasn't there that night, and then some of the effects I spent a lot of time kind of like sifting through. But typically anywhere from like 6 months to a year, I see myself kind of releasing them. Not because they're not ready by then. It's kind of just I used to try to force them too much, and then I'd find myself for 2 weeks just like banging my head against the wall, like, oh, like you just need to finish them. But I've changed my mindset to be more like natural. When it's ready, it will be ready, and it will be very easy to finalize everything. So I'll open projects every so often, tweak some things, and then I might not come back to it for 2 months and work on some other stuff. I think that's really good for keeping my interest and not getting discouraged that I have all these different things that I'm interested in doing, even like a dance beat or something. I'll just make that and then I'll come back to it months down the line.
That's
But
good. So instead of like capturing a lot of ideas on your phone, you're doing it with your DAW?
both. You you should see my voice memos. If I ever run out of an idea, I'll just go through. I'm like, no, not there. We go. That's what I'm feeling today. But for the most part, it's kind of just I'll almost pick like a not a feeling but more so like a type of song, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like for the song Bike, for example, I really wanted to make something in three that just went like open chord, whole band stops, open chord, whole band stops, and then 3 hours later I ended up with a song. That's typically how it just ends up going. But
That's cool. So does that mean that on the last project or projects you've recorded with other musicians as well, or are you playing the majority of things, or a little bit of both?
well, I mostly will start a song, and then if I think someone might go really well as a compliment on it, then I'll kind of approach them, being like, "I think you should do the drums for this. I think you should put the first verse, whatever." For the most part, though, I'm a very solitary kind of producer, just because when I get in my zone, I could just really focus on doing that. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not open to working with people because, for example, like I have a EP that I've been working on that's completely 50-50 with someone else, where one track he plays drums and guitar, I'll do the bass and sing, and then the next song will completely flip, just because it's really interesting kind of just to study how things like that come together.
Yeah. What's your most comfortable or favorite instrument? It looks like well, at least I know you play guitar and drums and maybe some other stuff as well.
Yeah, definitely guitar. That's what I started out on. That's the only thing I've taken lessons for. Drums would probably be two. Depending upon who you ask, they say that I'm a drummer first, which I find really funny. Just because typically they would see me be playing drums live the most, and they didn't even know I played guitar until years later, and they're like, "Aren't you that drummer? You play guitar now?" But that's my door into the house is guitar.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
does that mean you've done like in recent months or years done gigs on like for with other bands doing drums, or is that kind of doing your own thing with people?
Starting in let's see here, 2015 to 17, I pretty much only played drums live with people, and then I would have sets where it was just me with a microphone and a laptop. Um, but guitar is really the home base. Like I would switch every so often, even at those shows.
Hmm.
I would just have a desire to be like, come on, can we just switch for one song?
Yeah, right.
So people stop calling me the drummer.
That's funny. Or
But
they can think I'm a drummer, but that's a really good guitar player too.
yeah, I actually prefer playing drums live because you really get to set the energy of the room,
Sure.
and you could almost with cues, you know, like on the floor, if you kind of bring it up, the rest of the band is like, okay, this is the direction we're going.
Hmm.
And if you stop to do a build up, you could watch the audience from behind this thing sitting there. And I never got nervous on drums ever. On singing guitar, you could feel it because you're like in front and you're just there. But for some reason, drums, you get to like sit behind and just watch. And as you do the build up, you see people, they're like, oh, I know what's about to happen. And I haven't found that you can really easily do that on guitar or other instruments, you know. That's why I really like playing drums live.
Yeah, I would think. I mean, no criticism on you. I think it's a special guitar player who can command the stage with the band in that way and have them be the one that everyone's following. And they're out there. You've seen them, right? But that's like
Mhm.
a whole discipline in and of itself, right? But with drums, assuming the drummer's competent, it's kind of a forced issue that they're
Yeah,
going
yeah.
to you.
Well, I'm a firm believer in the band is only as good as your drummer, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
The guitars can shine, but if the drums aren't driving the whole thing forward, then there's just going to be moments here and there where the instruments kind of come through. But
Yeah.
yeah, I see you're mostly a drummer.
Yeah, and I always say there are two things that can bring a band down the fastest: a bad drummer and a bad singer.
Yep. Yeah.
For sure. When did you hook up with Paolo Trujillo of MIC? They're your PR people.
When I was in college, I actually was an intern at Mike,
Okay.
and there were only maybe four or five of us. We kind of focused on like business model development and trying to make local connections within Pittsburgh. Since then, that was 2015, where I was an intern there, and then about a year after that, I started kind of producing for Emily's music. She would write it and record her piano, and then I would pretty much do the rest and make it into a real song, which we continue to do now.
Is
But
Emily Paolo or someone else?
Emily Plazek, she's the founder,
Okay.
and the recent round of interns actually is maybe 7 or 8 months. So I've actually just met everyone there.
That's cool. That's
Yeah,
cool.
I'm like their guinea pig for their business model.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing it was kind of the intern experience there that made you think I really should do something like this. Why not use Mike?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. Also, just generally doing it myself and struggling and trying all these different things, being able to just focus on the music, that has definitely been the silver lining for meeting everyone
That's
and
good.
being
I
big.
It's
Yeah.
good to hear. It's funny today. Prior to our conversation, I was looking over, trolling your social media, and I was looking at some email exchanges that Paola and I had, and was thinking about the relationship and wanting to ask you a little bit about it. And then I was thinking to myself, tell me if this is true, that it sounds like maybe it's not, but I haven't worked with a PR rep yet. I really would like to, but these guys will help you get you opportunities, but do they still leave like all the social media stuff or a lot of the social media stuff in your lap? Obviously, they want to see that you've built an audience, and they probably, I'm assuming, or at least what I've heard understand is they want you to have done that or be working about it and thinking about it, all the time. But when you, as a client of theirs now, or do they still kind of lean on you to drive that and help you somewhat, or are they driving it for you?
It's all me for like Instagram, YouTube. That's all me. Yeah. They'll give me kind of interesting like documents for like what seems to work the best on Instagram, or you should make a video like this on TikTok. And I straight up asked them, I was like, if you guys ever come across a piece of content that you're like, Andrew should make something like that, just DM it to me. Because the nature of social media for me is kind of like, if I have 15 minutes free in my day, and I'm already just going to be like playing guitar or making something, I might as well record it and put it out, you know. But I really don't care much about social media. I probably should more, but I would much rather just be the musician and go live my life. That's why stories are my favorite to put up, but I never look at other people's stories. Just because if I'm on a bike ride or something, I'm like, wow, this is really cool. I mostly want to save it for myself and then add it to, like, for example, I've been traveling a lot the past 2 weekends and I saved them to a highlight. So down the line, years from now, I could just go through and be like, oh, let's look at the history of my traveling. Oh, I remember when I was there. So social media for me is more like a catalog of my life for me, which is why I only have 600 followers.
In a way, I worry for you over that because in 6 years, hopefully, you'll be able to access that content.
I know
You
I've
know?
been worrying about that, but even Snapchat, just saving everything. Sometimes I scroll all the way back to like 2013. I'm like, wow, how the world has changed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was trying to garner something a little personal about you, so I'm looking through your Instagram, and I'm like, oh, he's been on here a while. And I was thinking to myself, I was asking myself, like, when did I join? I don't even remember. But did you grow up in Pittsburgh? I meant to ask you that.
I grew up in right outside of Scranton, like 10 minutes out of a place called Moscow, just in the Poconos. It's eastern side of the state, right where Dunder Mifflin's located.
I
In
don't
The
know what
Office.
that is.
You ever watch The Office?
Yes.
That's that's the town they chose, is Scranton. That's where I grew up.
Yeah, Scranton. I totally got. I'm like, is that a Pittsburgh Steeler thing? I could, but it's the from The Office. Yeah, that I remember.
It's 5 hours from Pittsburgh. It's about an hour and a half from both New York City and Philadelphia. My whole family, besides my own nuclear family, is from New York City. You know, like used to go there every Christmas morning and stuff like that. But I moved to Pittsburgh for college, University of Pittsburgh, and then I've stayed out here since.
You have family in Moscow?
I do. Yeah, my
Okay.
parents are still there. I have a sister in Pittsburgh. Another one's down in Naples, Florida.
Okay.
Yeah.
A musician friend of mine who's just completely immersed in the business, and he's a real high caliber session and performing guy, and he moved from New Jersey to Pittsburgh recently during the pandemic. So he last time we spoke for the podcast, he was saying it's kind of a trip. When I do go to the office, he said it's like a ghost town, the downtown areas, and he's kind of wondering, what's it going to be like when it comes back to life.
Yep. No, it was so weird the past year. It was straight up a ghost town. That's like literally you could see the tumbleweeds. Like it was so strange.
Yeah.
It's starting to come back though. The past 2 months have been pretty bustling downtown. I think people are starting to either go there for meetings. I don't know if they're necessarily there 100%, but yeah, I have to drive through downtown quite often. So I could tell you from experience, the traffic is starting to pick up downtown.
Okay. Yeah, I would imagine just based on what I know about seems the US and the UK have kind of just said virus be damned and they're kind of reopening back up. So I figured it was starting to pick up. But I guess the fallout of it is just a lot of places aren't there anymore.
We really got lucky in Pittsburgh. It really wasn't like we literally had hospitals go out of business because they didn't get enough patients. Like
Mm,
we really were not hit hard at all here.
that's good.
Yeah, we lucked
Yeah, it's
out.
kind of weird. I know of hospitals that it's kind of strange. There were a lot of like I don't know about Pittsburgh specifically. While there were so many people who were struggling because of COVID and hospitalizations, there were all these hospitals that served other types of needs, and people weren't going. And in a lot of cases, people weren't getting sick with the usual stuff. People were postponing things. I have a niece in healthcare, and even heard I've actually talked to a couple people recently, and their jobs have gone away or changed. It's kind of strange, but yeah, the aftermath of a pandemic. You said a moment ago that you'd love to just play your guitar or play music. You're what I would view as very artistic. You do a lot of video stuff and very creative stuff. I was checking out the evolution of fuzz, which I have not seen all of. What inspired that? Now that I meant to bring it up.
Well, I'm a talker. I will talk my ass off to people, especially if there's some sort of like I'm a encyclopedia of useless facts, you know. So part of it was I found myself always telling people about vintage gear and the stuff that I grew up on, like Cream, Eric Clapton, whatever. So I had some free time and I just started researching it and putting it in a Google Doc. So it came to the point where I was spewing all these facts that I was researching to everyone. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to make them into almost like a PowerPoint to make it seem like your 8th grade teacher is showing you a PowerPoint and giving you a presentation, not only to make it more efficient for me to explain to my musician friends, to my regular friends, what the hell I'm trying to tell them, because otherwise I'd just be like, oh, well, let me just Google image search this thing from 1948 or whatever. But mostly just so I could, if I ever forget, I could just go back and reference all of my own research. Like, oh, what was the 1967 Marshall whatever? So I could just go back and like refresh my memory through it. And I really just had fun kind of like learning all of those specific nerd details and really nerding out for 1900s on. But I thought it was super interesting to not only look at the history of music, but through the lens of the gear, because the gear was invented because the people weren't satisfied with what they were trying to do. But then what the actual people ended up making was highly influenced by the gear that was readily available around them. So what better lens to look into like the product to innovation of music in the 19th century or 20th century, the entirety of from the invention of, like, we go back all the way to the 1400s in one of the videos. And it's so interesting how it all kind of comes from the invention of a technology and then just disperses into society through music. And there's a million rabbit holes that I kept falling into there. And then before I knew it, I think we're at what, like episode 36 or something.
Oh,
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to make one in a while, but I have all of them written. They're all ready.
oh, that's fantastic. I actually I just discovered them today. I know Paula had sent them to me as one of the first things she sent, but I went and checked out your music, I think, and I was like, that's kind of interesting, like to talk to him. And so just today I was I was just watching the first 2 episodes, one of them being the trailer, and I was immediately taken aback by how far back you were digging to understand it. Because for me, fuzz on guitar, there were 2 things that stood out in my mind, and I was asking myself, I wonder if these are in his series. I'm guessing probably, given how many you did, but the Satisfaction by the Stones, not just the fuzz tone that they had, but the actual audible switching of the device coming on before they do it. And the other one was Keith Richards overdriving the tape deck on with an acoustic guitar to get a distorted sound.
Yep.
For I guess Jumpin' Jack Flash, and then you were just probably me half a dozen other stories in the first few minutes of it. It's kind of cool. So I know you're younger than me, and when I read these influences, and I know you probably have a lot of them that you don't even have in your EPK, but so Hendrix, Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, Cream, and 10 Years After, that could have been on my, and probably is somewhat on my EPK. How is it that you came to fall in love with those bands?
My dad. I vividly remember one day going into his iTunes and he was like, well, this is Eric Clapton. I think Crossroads is the most impressive work that anyone has ever done, not only for music, but he's like, if you ever played that on guitar, that would be like the pinnacle of everything. And I remember he just showed me everything, and I immediately went through and downloaded onto my Dell MP3 player that was about this big. So I was that kid in like 4th and 5th grade listening to One of These Days by Pink Floyd during study hall, and and then I ended up getting a guitar. But like 60s, 70s, it was kind of the first time where rock and roll was truly becoming like a big thing, so I think there's something special about that time in particular that I always seem to come back to, especially Jimi Hendrix. I'd say he's my number one. Not to say that 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010 and brand new songs don't do the same thing for me, but there's something about the realm of people back then that all knew each other, that there's all these weird stories. Like I was reading Eric Clapton's autobiography last weekend. He used to sing for the Rolling Stones when Mick Jagger's voice was sore. Like, what the hell? It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
Wait, real quick, that Maestro fuzz tone too. Did you know that the only reason he used that I think it was like 6 years after the product came out and didn't sell at all. He had one,
Which one is this?
the original Maestro fuzz tone that he used on Satisfaction.
Okay.
He only recorded the dun, 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 because the horn players didn't show up.
Oh.
And he was just like, oh, I'll just put this down so we know what the horns will end up doing. And then all of the producers were like, no, you got to leave that. And Keith, when he first heard it on the radio, he was like embarrassed. He's like, that is the worst sounding guitar I've ever heard. But the rest is history, right?
That's funny. Yeah, I may have read this long ago, but it feels like either new information or something I've totally forgotten.
Yeah.
Great. That's great. I love it. Well, I look forward to checking out more of the series. So yeah, have you done? It looks like you've done maybe not several, but maybe several other kind of rich video things as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the blanking genius. I call it fucking genius, but it's like a bunch of symbols, ing genius, and that's kind of, it's in the root of, like, I took some film history classes, and I got in the practice of kind of like analyzing films in a certain visual way, or just thinking about all of the things that you can analyze a film through, all the different lenses. And one of them I had to like write a paper on, I think, or give a project presentation or something like that. So it was another example of a lot of times I found myself trying to explain why this French movie from the 60s was so unique to people, that I was like, you know what, I'm just going to make a video for it. It will save me time and effort. But I look at it in the same way, kind of, it's almost little, instead of like the 60s, 70s for music, it's almost little pockets where stuff like that happens for film. And I'm always interested in any time there's a group of people that all are kind of under the same flagship of, we're going to do this way. And out of that comes such a hyper stylized event,
Yeah. I don't know if you've heard it, but I'm listening to an interview of Quentin Tarantino on Mark Maron's podcast. And
he went on WTF?
Yeah.
Huh. No, I haven't heard. I heard the one on Rogan.
Yeah, and his movie, the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and the book, and but I'm not followed Quentin Tarantino a lot. I've seen some of his movies, obviously, but to hear him talk about the time period and his fascination with Hollywood and the actors and the differences of them today. So anyway, but you heard him on Rogan as well, or you heard him on Rogan?
I did, yeah. I'm a big fan of Quentin Tarantino, and it's funny, the 1960s France is the thing that he claims is the most influential on him, because they all knew so much about film, because for I think like 3 or 4 years, not a single person was making movies. And they all came together and they're like, okay, how are we going to make movies the right way? And they were super playful with it. And he lists this guy named Jean-Luc Godard, I think is his name, as his number one influence. And if you watch any sequence of shots from like any of those movies, you're like, Quentin Tarantino, that's where the style comes from. It really blows your minds. It's crazy.
That's funny. That's funny. Yeah, it was interesting. It definitely was reminding me, it's like, man, I just have lack the appreciation for some of these things like noir films, and it's largely an exposure or lack of exposure to things like that. And recently I was thinking, I really need to go start, rewatching some old movies or watching some old movies I've never seen, some of these classics, just to, I don't know, try and learn something. Yeah. So now everything, I mean, there's some good movies that come out nowadays, but a lot of it is cinematographically, visually over the top. In my opinion, and sometimes that's nice, but it seems to be at the detriment of stories at many times, or the acting or directing or whatever.
But every so often you get a movie like Jojo Rabbit. Did you see that? Came out 2 years. That's the one movie I always recommend to people. It came out about 2 years ago.
What's the name of it again?
Jojo Rabbit.
Okay.
I remember the first time I saw the trailer for it in the movie theater, I looked at the person next to me. I was like, what the hell is this? So the way I describe it is Tom Sawyer set in World War II Germany.
Okay.
And it's a mix between Tom Sawyer and The Diary of Anne Frank.
Wow.
But it is one of the only movies that not only will make you cry laughing, but make you like cry in sadness. But at the end, you're left with a feeling of so much hope for humanity. It's like such a wonderfully put together movie, and it's very unique. It's
I'll
not over
check
the
it out.
top for visuals, but somehow everything fits together. It's by Taka Waititi.
Okay, I'll check
Yeah,
that out. Very nice. Thanks for the recommendation.
sure, yeah.
So back to your music. It looked to me, I was interested. So I just started. I published my first two singles ever. I've been playing forever as a drummer. I dabbled in, writing and recording lyrics and, working with some musicians when I was much younger, and then just never did it again. But I published my first two singles this year, and the first one I wrote everything myself, and I on both of them I've had the same, more or less the same guys working with me on them. So I'm have the luxury of just being responsible for drums and vocals and the composition stuff in the first case. In the second one, I met a guy through a collaboration app called Compose, which is a web app for people who have DAWs. I don't know if you've heard of it, but I ran into a keyboard composition that he did, and it sounded kind of prog rock, and I'm like, oh man, that's great. And that was like the one thing that I threw up some drums for, because it's basically by invitation to, I need drums, vocals, whatever. So I put up a drum track, and I left it for a while, and then I got to thinking about wanting to do a second song, and I'm like, I should go back to that and see if maybe I feel like I could write lyrics to that, and certainly I could put together some drums I'd be happy with. And then so I did, and I the guy was happy to collaborate with me, so that's my second single. And when I was looking at probably your latest album, maybe I scanned through several of them, but it looks like you've done some collaborative writing as well. Is that very common for you these days, or do you bounce back and forth a lot to doing it all yourself as far as the writing, and then sometimes collaborating?
I seemed to bounce around more in the past, and now it's more like parallel. I'll have projects of my own that are different themes. Like for example, there's this almost like, it's not really a western or like surf rock type, but it's under that theme. It's kind of like psych rock ish. So meanwhile, as I'm doing that, which it's funny, I actually finished most of that before Studio Rat, but for some reason it just didn't feel ready yet. So I'm still finalizing that, and on parallel of that, I'll do collabs with whether it's another musician or just like a singer songwriter. I might have like old beats, or I'll just sit down with them and make one. With singles, it's really easy because you could do all of the above. You could bring in someone to record trumpet or saxophone over it, or piano. But again, it stems mostly from me sitting down by myself first and then bringing it to them. Sometimes, like on Studio Rat, there were some that it was literally just a recorded jam with two microphones, and then I just put a bass and vocals on top of it. But that's more of a rare occasion these days.
Yep.
Yeah,
So yes, but it varies.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Well, good.
like I said, it keeps me interested to do it that way for some reason. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been thinking about it. I thought I'm gonna write the next one like I did the first one, but I've not been playing guitar a long time. It's something like with my first endeavor decades ago with writing something. I had a guitar for quite a while, and I never really was disciplined with learning it. But I had a nice guitar. I'd play it once in a while for a short time. I was kind of into it. Never performed with it, but just with, play stuff with my musician friends. And then a couple of years ago, maybe picked it back up, and it's not something I've been doing every day. I wrote a song, got some guys to play proper guitar for me and everything. And I was thinking, I'll just write this next one. But I'm like, God, wasn't it easy though to collaborate on the last one? Maybe I should do that again because I feel more pressure. It's like, I guess I need to work on this guitar thing some more. And I also want to do some live streaming, just, like I'm going to play my first single on it and a cover song and do some of that stuff, right? That's what we should do, treat our people, right? But so there's all these things, and I was thinking, yeah, maybe I should collaborate. So anyway, it's encouraging to see that you were doing that. I feel somehow, even though
Yeah, yeah.
I know you're a guitar player first, but somehow I was looking at what you're doing, and I felt there was some similarities, even though our music's different too. And I love, by the way, on the music, and I guess it is your age, but you have the exact same. The very first concert I saw was Alvin Lee, and 10 years later.
Yeah, really?
Yes, but we have these exact same influences from our youths, And I certainly I'm really a rock guy at heart, but I listen to a lot of pop as well, and I try to listen to a lot of stuff just because I think it's good for me, right? I love blues and listen to world music and all that, but I'm really a rock guy at heart, and the way I've started recording is to try and let those live through those influences and let them come out. But anyway, I was going to say I love that you have these influences that were among the youth of your generation that you've melded with your guitar chops and the fact that you play drums. I mean, I almost half expect to hear you do a single sometime soon that sounds kind of traditionally rock, and then do another one that's going to have some hip hop laced in it, and maybe just some traces of rock or blues guitar in it. And I think that's
Yeah,
very cool.
yeah. And also I think it's less one or the other than it often comes across when you're trying to write something new, because people like I heard Timbaland say once. I mean, I'm not a huge fan, but he said when he makes a beat, even though he's sitting at his computer and can do all of it, he will do all of it with his voice first,
Mm.
because getting it down as quick as you can is so vital. If you have any inkling of an idea, or you could just force it out of yourself through improvisation, then it will come together much easier than sitting down and be like, okay, there's a guitar part that needs to go here. Should I do it or someone else should do it? Just sing yourself humming it, or
Mm-hmm.
record yourself whistling something,
Mm-hmm.
I do that all the time for trumpet because I cannot play trumpet for my life. I think that's the hardest instrument because it's the only one I can't play a single note on. But I'll whistle it, and it's not going to stay, but just getting down the idea is really the important part of making music, in my opinion. And a lot of, like you said, to you, like having to live through the influences. I would almost say that I try to have them live through me and just kind of channel it without thinking,
Sure. I
trust
think
my instincts being Led Zeppelin. You know what I mean?
totally. And I feel like for me, having done all of two singles, that happened accidentally. Like, for instance, literally when I started doing the first song, I'm like, I'd really love this guitar to sound like a Pete Townsend-y thing from Who's Next, and I'm going to play this aggressive drum track on it. So I gave it to a guitar player friend who's really great, and I told him that, but he played what he played, and I thought it sounded wonderful, and I didn't want to change it. And when I sat down to play drums, largely because it's another thing I've not been, at the time, was not doing a ton. I was just practicing. So when I sat down and I started trying to do something very aggressive, I'm like, that's not going to work. Let me just bring it back a little bit. And yes, I can put some nice stuff in there, but let's not try to be Keith Moon, shall we?
Yeah.
And so, but I guess what happened is, I think I hear these influences in my head. Then when you play it for people, it sounds like, yes, things that you like, but it wasn't what you expected they would say. And it's like, I'll take it. But
Yeah, but it still sounds like you, right? It's crazy.
yeah.
Even I'll sit down sometimes and try to make like an exact cover of a song, and 2 hours later, I'll have a song that sounds nothing like it. Sounds only like me, which is crazy. Like The Groove is a good example of that. There was some random Cream song that was never released. It was only like a live version called Meet Me at the Bottom, which is an old blues song that they played. But when I heard it, I was like, this is unfair, because hearing 100 watts of just boom, burn down, that was all I took. So I went down to start it as that, and before I knew it, I had a completely different song. That was nothing like that, but sounded only like me. But it started just being trying to sound like Cream. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice we have all that history in our ears or in our heads.
Yeah.
So,
So who's your favorite drummers?
obviously Bonham is among
Me too.
them. Love
Yeah.
Charlie Watts, Ringo. Love the
Nice.
stuff Keith Moon did. All the new guys are so incredible. I mean, and by new, I mean in the last 20 years, I was telling someone the other day that people have just been pushing the limits of our abilities, every decade. And so when you listen to drummers and guitar players now, I mean, I remember Eddie Van Halen saying, what you did, I don't know if this is his dad, but, he spent his time learning how to play these Eric Clapton things like Crossroads until he got bored. And it's just
Mhm.
like people constantly pushing boundaries.
Yeah, yeah.
So I mean, like when I watch the new guys, it's really fun. Someone I watch now, I don't think people, I don't know if a lot of people know her, but her name's Annika Nilles. She's a German drummer and
Mm.
composer, and she just mostly, I think, video. She probably does clinics. I don't think she's like a big touring act, although maybe she has. She's really fun to watch because she's kind of, for me, she's kind of an in-between of there's so much going on. I can't really wrap my ears around it too. She can do a lot of great technical stuff, and
Mhm.
she makes it sound like pop, and she can do all kinds of things I can't do, but it's fun, so it's fun to watch.
Yeah. You ever watch those Zildjian live videos?
I've seen a couple, yeah.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with those. They're incredible.
I'll check them out.
Yeah.
I'll check them out. What about you? Your favorite drummers?
Bottom is number one for sure. Ginger Baker's pretty cool, but
Yeah.
there's a guy. Did you ever hear of Bad Bad Not Good?
Huh.
They're a Canadian. They went to like jazz school together and they started playing hip hop covers, but they've worked with so many random people. Alex Sawinski is their drummer. He's probably my favorite currently that's alive. But I also kind of like some program drums too, because have you ever noticed if you try to play along with like a hip hop beat that's all programmed, it's kind of hard to play because it's not natural how you would play it on drums.
It's fun to try, but yeah.
Yeah. So
or to play around. It's fun to play around it.
Yeah, I like trying to either play the drum kit like someone would program drums, or program drums similar to how I would play it on the kit. You know,
Sure. I need to get into that. So I meant to ask you, what DAW do you use at home in your studio?
Reason.
Reason.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's by far the best. In the past like few years, it's outdated Pro Tools because it has all of the features that Pro Tools has built in for free. It's a very visual, like very intuitive design where any knob, it almost looks like a pedal board, and you can just right click on anything and edit the automation. It's great for recording, how it puts everything in stacks. Ableton's not bad. It's not as good for recording audio. It's good for manipulating audio, but Reason I think is the most well-rounded.
I just was on a call yesterday with a group, musician marketing group that I belong to, and there's an older gentleman in the group who's a lot of fun. He does gospel compositions, and it's funny, he's really gotten into streaming on Twitch. It's like changed his life, and this is a guy that's not like super tech savvy either, but he was asking about Reason, I think. So I may have this guy who would love to talk to you if you have the time. I'm going to look at my notes and or ping him and ask him if that was the one he was asking about, because he's thinking about, he's a Pro Tools user. And he said, I'm on a fixed income, and it's just like he was talking about the cost every month to have Pro Tools.
Insane.
So yeah, and that one works for Windows, right? Because
it does.
Okay, I bet it's the same one. That's cool. Okay, last question. What are you excited about in the coming months to be working on, or what are you working on? What are your plans for the coming months?
I'm excited to play outdoors a lot, but as far as actual songs, there's this project. It's almost like watching a movie with no visuals. It's just an album, but I really tried to make it kind of like a Western movie where it has surf rock influences, the Doors, kind of like psychedelic rock, but very I wouldn't even say it's experimental. It's just a bunch of different things colliding in a world. It's almost like a dream sequence, and I've been working on that for almost 2 years. So I'm very excited to finally be done with it. But more so, I'm excited to see what people think about it, because it's not going to be like the song of the summer. It's going to be more of like a David Lynch type thing where it's like, wow, that was a very coherent, thematic, stylized thing. Like even all the reverbs I use, like film score reverbs and stuff. So it literally sounds like how movies feel to you. So I'm excited for that. And it's always good just to get big projects like that just off your shoulders. And I have a lot of singles that I'm trying to figure out like which ones are going to go when, but I'm not trying to be like, this is the date, then 2 weeks from then is going to be this one. Mostly I'm just excited to get the stuff I have out, which is a good problem to have,
Totally. I'm envious. And I like, it sounds like maybe it's accidental what you're doing somewhat, but I like that you're spacing it out, because frankly, they're, trying to get people's attention constantly is an exercise. And I think right now, just like giving them bits at a time they can wrap their eyes and ears around. So it's probably a good thing you're doing that.
Yeah. I try to keep it as organic as possible.
Good deal. Well, I like it. Hey, man, it was nice talking with you today. Best of luck, and I will definitely talk to you again soon.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on, man.
For
Seriously,
sure.
great to talk.
This episode was powered by Bandzoogle, the platform for musicians and bands to build their website and manage direct-to-fan marketing and sales. Bandzoogle features powerful design options, a commission-free store to sell music, merch, and tickets, detailed fan data, integrations with social networks, and more. Plans start at just $8.29 a month, which includes a free custom domain name. Try it at bandzoogle.com and use the promo code ROBONZO, ROBONZO, to get 15% off your first year. That's bandzoogle.com, promo code ROBONZO. Did you know you can help other independent musicians find the Unstarving Musician by following or subscribing on your audio platform of choice? Well, now you do, and it really does help. And if you have feedback, please go to unstarvingmusician.com to get all my contact info. You can text me, call me, email me, leave a voice message right there on that page. Just go down to the bottom of the page and you'll find everything you need to know. I really would love to hear any of your comments, suggestions, questions, whatever you've got. And you can find links to just about everything talked about in this episode at unstarvingmusician.com/podcast. All right, I'm peacing out. Thank you for listening and sharing with your musician friends and fellow indie music fans. Peace, gratitude, and a whole lot of love.